Hello, YouTubians. This may or may not sound really loud. I'm sorry if it does. Today I will be talking about and analyzing what is quite possibly the most famous, or at least most famous non-gaming creepypasta. It is, of course, Squidward Suicide. Now, I remember before I read the creepypasta, I just saw these videos on YouTube and thought it was like YouTube poop. But it's not. Okay. So first I will read over the pasta, which I will do now. I just want to start off by saying, if you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed. There just isn't one. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. I wasn't paid, of course, most internships aren't, but it did have some perks beyond education. To adults it might not seem like a big one, but most kids at the time would go crazy over it. Now, since I worked directly with the editors and animators, I got to view the new episode days before they aired. I got right into it without giving too many unnecessary details. They had very recently made the SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to start up the season. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for several months. Just going to interrupt here for a moment. For some reason it says Series 4. I believe that should be Season 4. Okay, back to the pasta. Me and two other interns were in the editing room along with the lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received the copy that was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't final yet, animators often put up a mock title card, sort of an inside joke for us, with phony, oftentimes lewd titles, such as How Sex Doesn't Work instead of Rockabye Bivalve, when SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop. Nothing particularly funny, but work-related chuckles. So when we saw the title card, Squidward Suicide, we didn't think it more than a moment joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky music plays as is normal. The story began with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down as he has a concert that night and needs to practice. Someone says okay and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The bubble splash screen comes up, and we see the ending of Squidward's concert, when things seem to begin off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this point, sound is synced up with the animations, so yeah, that's not common. When he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skip never happened. There is a slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common in the show, but you could very clearly hear malice in it. Squidward is in full frame and looks very afraid, visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd with SpongeBob in center frame, and he too is booing, very much unlike him. This isn't the oddest thing though. What is odd is that everyone had hyper-realistic eyes, very detailed. Clearly not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more than just normal CGI. The pupils were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't yet question its appeal to children. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. The view out his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is that at this point there is no sound, literally no sound, not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It was as if the speakers were turned off, though the status of them working perfectly. He just sat there, blinking, in this silence for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, tentacles, over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute more, all the while sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through a forest. The screen slowly begins to zoom in on his face. By slow, I mean it's only noticeable if you look at it shots 10 seconds apart, side by side. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit, as if it twists in on itself for a split second then back to normal. The wind through the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe, as if a storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is the sound, and Squidward's sobbing sounded real, as if it wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were holes and the sound was coming through from the other side. As good as sound as the studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to be that good to produce sound of that quality. Below the sound of the wind and sobbing, very faint, things sounded like laughing. It came at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. We watched this show twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific, but I've had time to think about them. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen, as if a single frame was replaced. The lead animation editor paused and rewound frame by frame. What we saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. His face was mangled and bloodied. One eye dangling over his upturned face, popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open and his entrails lying beside him. He was laying on some pavement that was probably a road. The most upsetting part was that there was a shadow of the photographer. There was no crime tape, no evidence tags or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would seem the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were, of course, mortified, but pressed on, hoping that it was just some sick joke. The screen flips back to Squidward, still sobbing, louder than before, and half-body in frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down his face from his eyes. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic style, looking as if you touched it, you'd get blood on your fingers. The wind sounded now as if it were that of a gale blowing through the forest. There were even snapping sounds of branches. The laughing, a deep baritone, lasted at longer intervals and coming more frequently. After about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back. We all were, but we knew we had to. This time the photo was of what appeared to be a little girl, no older than the first child. She was laying on her stomach, her breasts in a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was too popped out and popped, naked except for her underpants. Her entrails were piled on top of her, above another crude cut along her back. Again, the body was on the street, and the photographer's shadow was visible, very similar in size and shape to the first. They had to choke back vomit, and one intern, the only female in the room, ran out. The show resumed. About 5 seconds after this photo played, Squidward went silent, as did all sound. Like it was when the scene started. He put his tentacle down, and his eyes were now done in hyper-realism like the others were in the beginning of the episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen, as if watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fear-inducing of all, as his sobbing was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did the deep voice laughing. And this time, the still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop it on the 4th and backed up. And my computer is being kind of glitchy. Okay. This time the photo was a boy, about the same age, but this time the scene was different. The entrails were just being pulled out from his stomach wound by a large hand. The right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down it. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different, but we couldn't tell what. He went into the next, same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker, and I lost it. I vomited on the floor. The animating and sound editors gasping at the screen. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They were played out as if they were frames from a video. We saw the hand slowly lifting out the guts. We saw the kid's eye focus on it. We even saw 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. He had to call in the creator to see this. Mr. Hillenberg arrived within about 15 minutes. He was confused as to why he was called down there, so the editor just continued the episode. Once the few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound again stopped. Squidward was just staring at the viewer, full frame on the face, for about 3 seconds. The shot quickly panned out, and a deep voice said, "Do it." And we see in Squidward's hand a shotgun. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatters the walls behind him and his bed, and he flies back with the force. The last 5 seconds of the episode show his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling on what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry about this. He demanded to know what the heck was going on. Most people left the room at this point, so it was just a handful of us to watch it again. Viewing the episode twice only served to imprint the entirety of it on my mind, and caused me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I stayed. The only theory we could think of was that the file was edited by someone in the chain from the drawing studio to here. The CTO was called in to analyze when it happened. The analysis of the file did show it was edited over by new material. However, the timestamp of it was a mere 24 seconds before we began viewing. All equipment involved was examined for foreign software and hardware as well as glitches, as if the timestamp may have glitched and showed the wrong time, but everything checked out fine. We don't know what happened, and to this day nobody does. There was an investigation due to the nature of the photos, but nothing came of it. No child scene was identified, and no clues were gathered from the data involved, nor physical clues in the photos. I never believed in unexplainable phenomena before, but now that I have something happen and I can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence, I think twice about things. Okay, well, that was the creepypasta. This is a little different, though, than the first time I saw it. I think it may have been edited by the writer, or someone else. I don't know. So, right in the childhood. Now, to analyze the creepypasta, we have to look at a few more smaller details, such as the end where it talks about the 24 seconds before before they saw it when it was edited. First of all, there's no reason to think that it couldn't have just been edited 24 seconds before. It was popped out of the computer, someone had done something, and that's about there is to it. Although, I think the very videos on YouTube that show the lost footage of it are probably the greatest proof that it never happened. There's this one video here, on the creepypasta website. It is entitled Squidward Suicide Original. I don't know if this is embedded from YouTube or if this was copied and pasted onto YouTube. Now, first of all, this video is 1 minute 59 seconds, just short of 2 minutes. And I'm not sure exactly when in the creepypasta this is supposed to be, just because of inconsistencies. I guess this is supposed to be after that 5-frame animation thing, or no, right before it, I mean. When he was staring into the camera, crying and screaming, and blood dripping down from his eyes. This is the image that is most commonly incorporated with this creepypasta, the thumbnail of this, but the thing is, it's entirely still. It doesn't even sound like sobbing or screaming. It sounds like some guy. It just sounds like some fat guy going on a rant about something in like Swedish or something. I don't even know. And I realize it's probably just supposed to sound like the wind, the blowing wind in the background, but there's something that sounds like some kind of heavy metal guitar music playing. Now, if this had just been something on YouTube, I wouldn't think anything about it, but it was posted on the creepypasta page, clearly by the creator, maybe even it was made by him, but it contradicts the creepypasta. For example, it never said anything about the rest of the frame, the rest of the scene being drawn in hyperrealism, only his eyes. Yet in this creepypasta, it looks like it's a desaturated picture of Squidward with those eyes that are going to make me pass out in 5 seconds, pasted over some kind of photograph, not Squidward's little animated Easter Island head room thing. So that was posted on there, yet the creator was, even though it contradicts the pasta, he put it on there. There are a bunch of things that branch off of this, like Red Mist and a few others. These really just kind of contradict it even more. I might even go into more detail in later episodes, making new parts to this, talking about these pastas. But, well, for now, I think we can pretty safely say that this never happened. Now, it is true that the 4th season took a strangely long amount of time to come out, and that ownership was given from Hillenburg to Paul Tibbett. But, well, there are lots of reasons that could have happened. You can look at this 2 ways. The creepypasta came about because someone noticed this and decided to do something about it. And, or you could look at it the other way, that this is why. But this is just some random thing. I don't know why anyone would actually think that this would be why. It was most likely because Hillenburg couldn't think of anything after making the SpongeBob movie, and in fact that was probably supposed to be the finale to the SpongeBob series before they decided to keep it going under new ownership. And well, I suppose it's possible that it's real, but I would highly doubt it. If it were real, we'd probably hear more about it other than just on the Creepypasta website. You look around the entire internet, you never find an article or anything in a newspaper or magazine about it, just the Creepypasta and other various spin-off Creepypasta, which would also suggest that this has never happened. So, thank you for watching, and I will be doing more Creepypasta analysis videos in the future, but for now, this is the end of the analysis of Squidward's Suicide.